There are two types of views that allow us to do more extensive detailing in a Revit model. The first kind of view is called a section view, and the second view is a callout view. A section view allows us to cut through a building or an object at whatever location we draw the section and be able to see each of the different layers of materials that that entity is made out of. A callout view is an enlarged detail, so we can zoom in and see a higher level of detail. In this instance, we're going to take a look at both a section and a callout view, and then review how each of those are placed. Zoom in here where we have our restrooms, and you'll see that a section view symbol has already been placed. The first thing we need to do is either double-click on the circle, or under your project browser, look underneath the category of sections for section main building, and then double-click on that view. What we'll see when we do that is a cut right through this wall location. And here we can see where we have the floor down below. We can begin to see the floors coming up. Right here is a roof. And we can see this is the outer wall that it's cutting through. This entity here with a circle with a few dashes in this line, this is what's called a callout. It's also used to be able to create enlarged details of spaces. If we wanted to see an enlarged detail of what this looks like, highlight over the circle and then either double click on that or double click where it has callout at roof. And this will take you to an enlarged detail of this particular area. What you would do in this case, once you had the enlarged detail, you would come back in using drafting tools to finish it off so it's created just the way that it should look as far as when the building is constructed. Now this is how we place these inside of our plans. I'm going to click the X up here in the corner of each of these views until I get back to the floor plan view. Zoom out, and now let's come out to this building, and it's a garage out here at the outside. Select on the View tab, and then pick on Section. We're going to create a section through one of these walls. Make sure that Reference Other View is cleared out, so there's no check mark in there. Click once, come over again, click again. Now, anything you want to see inside of that section view has to be inside of this dash box that we see going around the view. If we'd want this window to be inside of the view, we would have to pull this down so that the window was actually crossing over this line right here. If we don't want to see the window in the view, we would pull it up, and now the window would no longer be inside of this view. Now, to see the section itself, once again, move over here, and then either double click where right now it says section 1, or double click where the circular part of this section symbol is at. And this will take us to a section going through that part of the building. Now that we've done that, we can look over here and we can see the scale is 3/16 of an inch equals 1 foot. We could change that by clicking on the scale and picking any scale that we'd want off of the list. In this case, I'd like to give it a more traditional wall section scale. I'm just going to choose 3/4 of an inch equals a foot off of the list. We couldn't see much of a change on the screen, but it did change the overall scale of everything that was drawn. Unfortunately now, we're not seeing too much detail. We're seeing some concrete pattern here, but that's about it. The next thing I'd like to do is right next to the scale, there's an option that says detail level, and it's currently set to coarse. Change that from being coarse to a fine level of detail. Now we can see each layer of material that makes up this wall. Now the idea behind coarse versus fine, a coarse level of detail is great for an overall building section that just shows cutting through the building, and we don't necessarily care about how each material relates to one another. A coarse level of detail, on the other hand, will give us a finer level of detail, so we'll be able to see each layer of material that makes up items like this wall. The next thing I'd like to do a detail of, or actually in this case, it'll be called a call out of, will be this location here where the wall comes up and hits the roof. To do that, underneath the View tab, we're going to select on Call Out. Click once, hold your mouse button down, then you can let go of the mouse button, and then when you have this windowed around this general area, click again, and zoom in a little bit. What this is going to do is it's going to create what's called a call-out view just in this area. Move down, double click where the circular shape is at, and now we can see an enlarged detail of this particular area, ready for us to be able to put in such things as maybe insulation, individual brick coursework, as well as a top plate here to support the roof on top of the wall. So your sections and callouts, their purpose is to give us a better indication of how these walls come together, how the different materials come together, and enlarge these so that we can get a fine enough level of detail that we can easily communicate the design without each of these items being too small to be able to see. In this exercise, we'll learn how to add text or annotation to a view. Let's zoom in here on this wall section view. And what I'd like to do is begin by adding a piece of text over here that's going to indicate that this room is part of the garage area. Come underneath the Annotate tab and then select on the big A, which is going to be A text. It's the text command. On the ribbon, you're going to see 4 different A's. This one will not have a leader associated with it. So that's going to be the type that we're going to pick in this instance. I will point out that this is text 1/4 of an inch Arial. So this is going to be a fairly big note when we click in here and type it in. Somewhere in this general area where you can see my cursor moving around, click once, and we can start typing inside of the text box. Type in garage, and then click somewhere out in space when you're done typing. When you do that, you can now see that the word garage is there, and it's defining the fact that this area is our garage area. If we need to move this around, you can select back on the piece of text, and there's these little arrows here that stand for drag. And if you click and hold your mouse button down on those arrows, you can then move that title around any place you feel like on the screen. We're not going to do this in this particular case, but I'll also point out it looks like sort of a circular arrow. By clicking on that and holding the mouse button down, we would be able to rotate this text around whatever angle we needed it to be at. Now, perhaps the way that this is written isn't quite the way that we'd want it. Maybe instead we need to modify this text after the fact. Select back on that piece of text and then click on it really quick twice. If you do that, you'll then be able to modify it right from this screen. Perhaps I want this to read 2-car garage instead. I just use my arrow keys to come back to the front, though I could have clicked right in front of the G. I'm going to type 2-car. And one thing that you'll notice is that this starts to go down 1 row at a time when you do this. Go ahead and click out here in space. The reason why I did that is that it did create a text box when we first clicked and started typing in the word garage. Well, the box grew to whatever the length of the word garage was, and then it stopped. When we clicked back inside of the text box again, the text box knew how big it should be at that point, so it kept itself at that size, and it just started doing these words one after another down like this because they could no longer fit into the box. If we want to make this box be a little bit bigger, we can. Just click on the text, move your mouse over here to this individual dot, which is technically called a grip. Hold your mouse button down on the dot, and you can pull it out as far as you want, or pull it in as far as you want in order to create the kind of text condition that you want to achieve. In this case, I'm going to leave it right about there and just have it say 2-car garage, and then click out here in the space. If we'd wanted to predefine the size of that text box, we could have done that as well. Now, I'm not going to actually type anything here. I just want to show you the process of predefining the text box. And that would have been by coming underneath the text command, clicking and holding your mouse button down, and then dragging the size you'd like the text box to be, then letting go. And you can see how long this would be automatically. And if I'd start to type, once I got to the end, it'd wrap the next word down to the next line, and come to the end, wrap the next word down to the following line. Now, since I don't want to type anything in this box, I'm just going to click out here in the space. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is start to label what some of these inner materials are on our wall section. I'm going to pick this next one, which is called 2 segments. This one, which is curved, and this one, which is 1 segment, all do basically the exact same thing. The only difference is how the arrow looks. This one is going to have an arrow that looks just like this arrow looks on the preview that's going to pop out here in just a second. It's going to go up, and then it's going to curve over. It's going to be a nice hard angle. The curved, very similar, except it has a curved arrow at the end. And then the top one, which is 1 segment, doesn't have that extra extension at the end. It's just a straight line and then stops right there at the end. Let's start by doing the 2 segment. Click here in this general area, move up, click right about here, come over, and you'll notice that when you come over to where the text is at down below, you'll get a blue dashed line that shows up. This blue dashed line will show up anytime that you move your text over to an area that's lined up with another piece of text. This allows you to quickly be able to line your text up without needing to draw in extra lines to know that these are in fact in a nice clean line. Once you get to this dashed line, just click and you can start to type in. In this case, it's going to be 2x6 studs at 16 inches on center. The at symbol, 16 inches OC for on center. If at this point you click enter, it'll take you down to the next line, and if there was more that you needed to add, you could continue the type. In this case, though, I don't need to, so just click somewhere out here in the space to finish off the command. I'm going to hit escape a couple times on the keyboard. Once again, I'm going to come back up to the text command, and in this case, I'm going to show you the curved arrow. So pick on curved, click in roughly the same kind of area. You'll see that blue dashed line that tells you that yes, indeed, your text is lined up. You can click there. Once you get to this spot, the next thing that you should type in is going to be R-19 bat insulation, and then click in order to end the command. And you can see that all this text is lined up. Now, the next thing I'd like to show is the fact that even after the text has been placed, we've already proven that the text can be changed by clicking on it and then clicking in the box again and then typing in something new. But in this case, these are both 1/4 inch tall, which is really too big. So underneath properties, under the type selector list, we're going to change these to be 3/32 Arial. We can see that the notes are much smaller now. The truth is that this is at a 1/4 inch print size, and this is at 3/32 of an inch. So no matter what the scale of that view is, this will always be at the correct print size. So 3/32 will always print at 3/32 of an inch. If we select back up here where the text is at again, I'll point out that there is the one segment option. I'm going to move back down here again, click in this area right here. We can see that the dashed line is showing up. I'm going to change this to be 3/32 Arial before I make my next click. So that means when I place this text and I type in airspace, that's going to be that 3/32 Arial font. And the last thing to know as far as this text is concerned is if I select back on any of these pieces of text, look over here underneath properties. Right now we've been talking about the 3/32 as well as a 1/4 inch Arial under the type selector list. The reason why they have those properties beyond just the properties we've seen up here is if you select on the edit type button, you'll see that this is the font and it's a Windows font. It's always going to need to be a Windows font. This is the size that the font would be, the width that the font would be, and the rest of the properties associated with such things as the arrow. So in order to place text inside of your Revit dialog, and I'm just going to go ahead and select on OK to that. Remember, it's underneath the Annotate tab, and it's the big A with the word text next to it. You select on that, choose whether or not you want to have an arrow or not, and then click wherever you want to place either your arrow or your first line of text. In this exercise, what I'd like to do is start to place in dimensions. You can find your dimensions underneath the Annotate tab. You'll see that there's a dimension section, and in this section, there's aligned, linear, angular, radial, diameter, and arc length options for the different kinds of dimensions that you can place. I'll go ahead and mention that the arc length dimension, what it allows you to do is pick one spot along an arc, pick another spot along an arc, and then it will place a dimension, much like the dimensions you see currently on the screen, along that distance between the first spot and the second spot that you clicked along the arc. Radial and diameter will both give you either the radius or the diameter of whatever circle it is that you pick. Angular, that will give you the angle between the first wall that you select and the next wall that you select, or lines that you select or any objects that you select. Linear dimensioning goes straight across, so it would be from left to right or up and down. Align will place a dimension which is aligned with those walls that you're trying to dimension. So if your wall is at an angle, your dimension will be at an angle as well. My personal favorite is going to be the align dimension because you can do so much with it, and we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. But let's start off by using the linear dimension. So select on linear. And what I'd like to do is do a dimension from this intersection. So click right at the intersection of where these two mullions come together. Zoom in to the other side of your building. Pick the intersection where those mullions come together. And you can pull this dimension string up and then click wherever you'd like it to be placed. If we zoom in, we can see that this overall dimension is 84 feet 5 inches. In this case, there is what's called a background mask associated with this dimension. So as a result of that, this line that otherwise would be going through it, leading up toward where the circle with the 3 is at, is being masked by the dimension itself. But if you don't like that, and I just hit escape a couple times to get out of the command, all you need to do is select on the dimension line. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this piece of text over. And you'll see as I move the dimension over, you'll get a leader that moves over along with it and will always point back at that original dimension line. So in this case, we can still tell this 84 feet 5 inches, and it's pointing back to this dimension. Now in this case, we really probably don't need to have this leader here. If we want to remove the leader so it doesn't even show up, we can do that by selecting on the dimension. Underneath the options bar on top, you can clear the check mark for leader, and you'll see that that leader line will now go away. Now I'm just going to click to finish off that command. And we could continue to do dimensions like that going down the side. Annotate, linear, pick that intersection right there. And it's really hard to see. It's one of the reasons why I dislike using linear at times. Click that endpoint there, and then pull it over in this direction. Now I'm going to select back on that line, clear the leader checkbox so I don't get that extra little leader line showing up. And then I'm going to drag the text by clicking on the little dot there and drag it just down so it's no longer touching this line. So linear dimensioning allows you to click one spot, click another spot, and then you'll get an overall dimension for that length. A line, though, like I mentioned earlier, is probably my favorite dimension to use. If you select on a line, there's a couple of different ways to use an align dimension. First off, we should know that we're going to be dimensioning to the wall faces, or maybe to the wall center lines, or we can even do it to the core faces, which would be the face of the structural members inside of the wall. And we have our choice as to what it is we like to dimension to. In this case, I think I'm going to actually choose the faces of core. By choosing on the faces of core, when I start to place these dimensions, it's going to go from the finished face of those structural members. I'd like to place a dimension string just going across the interior right here. So I'm going to start by picking this line on the inside edge of the men's room. I'm going to pick another line there. I'm going to completely skip over these walls here just for now, and then click here, come over, click again on the next face of the wall, and then click on the face of the wall there along the break room. And you can see that I can begin to move these dimensions up or down and place them wherever I would choose along this room. In this case, so that I can kind of get away from most things, I'm going to come all the way down toward the very bottom and then click and hit escape a couple times on the keyboard. At this point, I'm going to select back on that dimension string. I'm going to move this 18-foot dimension over by clicking on the little grip and pulling it over. You'll see that if I wanted to, I could always remove the leader so that that leader is no longer associated with that dimension. You'll see that I have this 0 feet 3 5/8 inch dimension. I'm going to pull it over as well. We're looking at this 0 feet 3 5/8 inch dimension. Typically, we usually don't have this 0 feet. Most people that I know don't do that. Type in UN, and that's going to activate the units command. Come up here to length, and you're going to see a gray bar here, and it says 1 foot 5, 11, 30 seconds. Click in that area, and then put a check mark next to suppress 0 feet, and click on OK. Move down, select on OK again, and you'll notice that any place where it has a 0 foot dimension, it's now removed it. Now it just says 3 5/8 of an inch. And it would have done that on any other dimension as well where that condition would have occurred. I'm going to select back on this dimension now, and I'm going to put leader. And you can see how this leader is now coming in, and it's pointing down in this general area. Something else that I want to show. Right now, all these lines are looking pretty thin. For you, you might have some thickness associated with these lines. The reason why mine look fairly thin is because underneath the View tab, I have thin lines turned on. If I turn my thin lines off, we'll then see the thickness associated with both the dimensions as well as the lines that they're associated with. Over here where I have this 18-foot 6 7/16 dimension, I'm going to click this and just start to drag this back over again, and you can see what it tries to do. The only drawback to doing this the way that I did it by going click, 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 is that this is still going to be assumed to be all part of the same dimension string. So this particular dimension either is going to have the leader or else it won't have the leader at all. So that's one of the things you have to think about when you're placing your dimensions by clicking all the way on across is, am I going to run into a condition where I don't want one of these to have a leader? If that's the case, you might want to do that as a separate dimension apart from clicking all the way on over. So you'd click, 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 stop the command, do another dimension, in this case, the 18 foot 6 and 7/16, so that this one specifically would not have a leader associated with it. And we could continue to separate these out if we wanted to by just clicking on the dots, pulling them down, pulling them over, and placing them wherever it made sense for our dimension strings. What we've done there, and I'm just going to come back up to the Annotate tab, was one way that you can use the Align dimension. But there's another way as well. So I'm going to select on the Align command, and instead of pick individual references, I'm going to do pick entire walls. Select on Options, and in this case, put a check mark next to Openings. So it's going to auto-dimension the openings, and click on OK. What I'd like to do is now place a dimension up here on this wall. I'm going to add a quick disclaimer. This does not work very well on curtain walls. You'll still need to use the individual clicking method if you're going to dimension curtain walls. But for your basic Revit wall types, this works great. I'm going to move in here and I'm going to select on this wall right here. And we can see that it's dimensioned each one of these window openings on center all the way on across. Now maybe we didn't want this to be dimensioned on center. Maybe we wanted it to be dimensioned to the edge of the openings themselves. We could have done that too. Once again, underneath Options here, and instead of having openings being to the centers, we could have chosen openings being to the widths. Instead, click on OK. Now I'm going to dimension this wall right here, and we can see that it's done it to the widths now. The way that we originally told this to dimension is to the faces of core. That's the reason why this dimension string is going to the location that it's at, but we can adjust this after the fact as well. I'm going to click right here where this dot is at, and I'm going to hold my mouse button down and drag this to the outside edge and let go. And you can now see it's dimensioning to the outside edge of the wall. You could do the same thing up here. Click, hold your mouse button down, and drag it to the outside edge. When it highlights, you can let go, and it'll adjust those dimensions accordingly. I'm going to hit Escape a couple times on my keyboard just to get out of the command. I'm going to select on this dimension string going across the top. And I also want to mention there's one other thing that you can do. Instead of clicking and holding your mouse button down, you can just click once, and it'll start to cycle through all the different things that it can dimension to. In this case, it's continuing to try to dimension to the faces of the core. On the other hand, if we change this to be wall faces instead, and now try to click on this dot, let's see if it makes any difference in this case. Okay, it's not making a difference, so just click on the dot and drag it out to the end, let go, and you can see it's now going to go out to the end. If this had been set at wall faces by default, that's where the dimension would have went to by default. Instead of just to the inside edge, it would have went to the outside edge, the wall face instead. So it just would have dimensioned it correctly. Now we're going to zoom back out again. We can see that it's placed those dimensions in each of those locations. This also works pretty well if you're going to be dimensioning such things as some of your interior walls. If we take a look at the Align dimension one more time, the entire walls, wall faces is going to work just fine for me. As far as this, I can do intersecting walls as well. Click on OK. I'm going to pick this wall, and now any wall that intersects this wall, this wall, this wall, this wall, this wall, will now get a dimension. Click, and you can see that dimension string is going to get created for each one of these individual walls. Now, I don't really want to place this one because I've done most of this already down here, so I'm just going to hit the Escape key on my keyboard to get out of the dimensioning command. I don't really have a good radius to dimension to, so I'm not going to show the radial or diameter. But basically, it's just a matter of selecting the command, selecting the circle, and it'll automatically place it in there. With arc length, it's basically the same way. You click arc length, click the arc you want to dimension, click the two spots on the arc that you want the dimension to, and it'll automatically give you the dimension. And then with angular, you click the one surface, you click the next surface, and then tell it where you'd like that angle to go to. So being able to place those dimensions, always remember that's underneath the Annotate tab. You'll have your dimension tools here. And the ones you're most likely to use are probably going to be linear and aligned. And my guess is when it's all said and done, you'll probably use aligned the most often, because if you choose the entire walls option, you can then choose the options button and then pick whether or not you want to dimension to intersecting walls or to openings to run a really quick dimension strain all the way across that particular wall.